So we formed the hub to basically to ensure the quality that was coming out of YouthMappers projects was of the highest quality possible. And the better the quality of the data, of course, the better it can be used for any kind of project that people would want to use it for. So this is where the hub came from. And our initial process was to identify all of the projects that exist in the tasking managers, be it the hot tasking manager or the teach tasking manager, and identify all those projects that belong to YouthMappers or were set up by YouthMappers, and then start validating them if they weren't already validated, and then sort of have a record of those. And sort of we're still slowly working through all of those projects, but as well addressing new projects that that come up. So that's where we're sort of where we are. And as a part of this program that we've set up essentially with the validation hub, we created some documentation on how to use JOSM, which you'll sort of partially benefit from today, and as well as the validation workflow. Because the idea is that we can share this information with other YouthMappers chapters and anybody else in the world really who wants to learn about validation. Now, obviously, HOTS, Missing Maps, and other organizations have been doing validation and using JOSM in the past. So we do stay in step and lean on those materials to continue to send the word out about validation and to help people sort of get up to speed on their validation and using the appropriate tools and the latest sort of techniques that people are using in the community. As you'll see, there are a number of resources that are available for JOSM. And one of the things we wanted to do was to offer JOSM training to the YouthMappers Network and anybody else who wanted to join. And the idea is that eventually we will hopefully get more people validating as well, or at least feeling comfortable to validate. So the idea of validation, of course, is that you have an experienced mapper, so you know about OSM, you know how it works, you understand the architecture, and you have done a lot of mapping yourself, so that we can, so you have this experience and of using those data and sort of interpreting the imagery. So it makes you sort of experienced mapper, so you're able to look over other people's edits and determine if they are good or not. So as part of the hub, we're going to be offering these trainings, a JOSM training. Then a few weeks later, we haven't picked a date yet, but in August, most likely we'll offer a validation training. Since all of the validation we do is in JOSM, we figure we'll do it in that order. So every fall and every spring, and now through the summer, when we have the personnel to do so, we will host a JOSM training, followed a few weeks later by a validation training. So if you're interested in learning more about validation, please keep an eye out for that as well. Okay, so the way today will work, if you have questions, please throw them in the chat, because when myself or Kate are presenting, the other person will be monitoring the chat window for questions, and we'll address those at sort of points throughout the lecture. But we'll have a number of slides and a lecture to go through today. This will be followed by a demo of some actual tools. So you'll see us explain some of the things in our presentation, and then we'll sort of follow that up with actual demo in JOSM. If you have JOSM installed on your computer and you want to follow along with Kate and myself as we do the demo, please go ahead and do so. And as questions come up, please put them in the chat. We'll try to address them all as we come across them, okay? As well, there will be a breakout room for anybody who would like to just straight up do some mapping today. Dara is making has made a breakout room for the mapping portion of that. And if you guys want to do that, go ahead and go through that now, because we're going to start the presentation shortly. But Dara, I'll give you a second to talk things out.
Okay, everyone, so you should have just gotten a notification that there is a Mapathon breakout room that you have the option to join. If you don't have the updated version of Zoom, you don't have that option. So if you would like to join the Mapathon room, go ahead and put a 1 in front of your name, or you can put in the chat and I'll help you join that room. I'll do the behind the scenes there. And I'm gonna go ahead and ask all of the interns or any other hub members at GW to please join me in that Mapathon room so we can get it started. We will be mapping in Sierra Leone for the power mapping task. And once the JOSM training has completed, everyone will come back into the rooms together and we will continue mapping together. I think I covered it all. Kate, Richard, anyone else? Did I miss anything?
I think that covers it. Are there any initial questions before we jump into all this? Awesome.
Okay. Okay, great.
All right, so I'm going to start sharing and my screen. And for those going to the Mapathon room, thank you for coming and thank you for mapping.
And also real quick, I'm gonna have to stay here for a couple of minutes to make sure that no one doesn't have that ability that they need to add a one to their name. So for the interns at GW, if you all can go ahead and get started once you join that room, that would be great. Thank you.
All right, so you guys should be able to see my presentation window now, correct?
Yes, we can see it.
Excellent. Okay. So again, this training is just on JOSM, and we're starting here to give you an introduction. So if you know a little bit about JOSM, but you want to learn a little bit more, this is the place for you. If you've never used JOSM, this is the place for you. So let's get things going. And again, as you have questions, please put them in the chat window and we'll address them as best we can as we move along. There we are. So we're going to start with the very basics and get an understanding of what JOSM is. JOSM stands for Java OpenStreetMap Editor. Okay, it's a desktop application, so it is separate from ID, which is what most people have used when they've been introduced to OSM. So it's something you have to download and install separately onto your computer. And another key thing that makes it different from ID is that when you are working with OSM data with JOSM, you actually have to sort of pull down or download the data from OSM. You do your edits in your desktop environment, and then you push back those data to the OSM server. All right, so you're actually pulling information down, doing your edits and pushing it back. So that makes it sort of very different from the ID interface, which is just an in-browser editor that you guys have used before. And some people do find the interface a little intimidating. It does look a little dated. It's not slick, it's not sexy, but it works. It's stable and has a lot of really good tools. Now we'll go into the components of this interface shortly. So don't let all the widgets and tools and buttons sort of intimidate you at all. But we'll sort of break this down a little bit, and as you start to use it, you'll become more familiar with it. JOSM has been around for quite a while now, so there are a lot of good training guides online. LearnOSM.org has some great tools that you can use for learning JOSM. There are a number of wikis to reference as well. Of course, we have our documentation on the YouthMappers website as well. And of course, there are documentation talking about validation with regards to using JOSM as a tool for validation available as well. So as I mentioned, it is a standalone software application that you need to download. So we're not going to go through the whole install process, but I just want to highlight a couple of key things here. It is the Java OpenStreetMap editor. It runs on Java. And so your computer needs to have the sort of one of the later or latest versions of Java on installing your computer for JOSM to run. And luckily, in Java, of course, it's free to download. But when you actually go to install JOSM itself, it will actually check your computer for the appropriate version of JOSM. Appropriate version of Java. So if your computer needs a Java update, it'll prompt you to do so. Okay, so it'll prompt you to update your Java. So you'll update Java, then you can continue on with the install of JOSM. So it's built in and it works pretty smart. And as you can see, you can download it on if you're using a Windows installer or if you're using Mac. It's pretty stable and it works on a lot of different platforms. So it's a very, very good tool. If you're new to JOSM, brand new to JOSM in particular, you'll see some tools here today that will probably make it your favorite editor for OSM data.
Right, so now I'm just going to give you a brief walkthrough of setting up JOSM once you have it downloaded. JOSM is a free software desktop editing tool, and it's used to work on offline data that a user has downloaded or uploaded. And offline editing means that everything you do won't be visible for anyone else until you upload it to the server. Next. The very first thing you need to do when you download JOSM is to authorize your account. So to do so, you'll go to Edit, then Preferences, And once in Preferences, you'll select the connection setting and click Authorize Now, enter all your OSM credentials, and then hit Authorize Now again and accept the access token. The next thing we want to do is set up remote control. Having that same preference window still open, select the remote control setting, and all you have to do is check one little box that says Enable Remote Control, and you're all good to go. But keep that same preference window open because you'll want to download a few plugins next. So there are a ton of helpful plugins that you can find in JOSM. For now, I'll just talk about a few that we think are helpful to have downloaded right from the start. The first is the Buildings tool plugin. This tool allows for you to trace one side of a rectangular building and then extend the shape so the building is always perfectly squared off. It will also automatically apply the label, which is the building equals yes tag, to the shape. If you have a task with lots of buildings to be mapped, this tool can save you a ton of time. Once the plugin is downloaded, all you have to do is hit the letter B on your keyboard and you're good to start mapping buildings with ease. The next plugin is Utils plugin 2. This is a collection of useful tools which can be found under the More Tools tab. Under the More Tool tab, you'll find that the Add Nodes at Intersections tool, which is helpful for adding missing nodes and intersections of selected ways. And there's also the Add Source Tag tool, which simplifies adding a source tag. It'll remember the source that was specified last and then add it as remembered source tag to your object. The last plugin that I'm going to talk about is Mapathon. This tool can be used to create residential areas by selecting a group of buildings and clicking on Pick Residential Area in the Mapathon tab. It'll also batch, circle, or orthogonal buildings. To install these helpful tools, just select the plugin icon in the preference window. And once there, search for buildings and check the box next to building tools. Do the same for Utils plugin 2 and Mapathon. Once you have those all selected, download the list. Click Download List to install the plugins. The next slide. So now that you have JOSM all set up, you want to learn how to and become comfortable with navigating it. On the left side of your screen, you'll find your editing tools, which contains drawing tools and the show hide buttons for the information panel. The main window is where you'll be able to see what you're mapping. This is where all your edits take place. To drag the map, hold your right mouse button and then drag your map where you want it to be. To edit or manipulate an element, click on it with your left mouse button, and then to zoom in or out, use the scroll wheel on your mouse or the plus minus buttons on your keyboard. The top bar is the main menu. This area is customizable based on what plugins you may have. It's where you'll find those extra tools for Utils plugin 2 and Mapathon. Right below this top bar is the shortcut toolbar. Buttons in the toolbar are shortcuts to commands from the main menu. And then on the right side of your screen, you'll find the information panels. This presents all the information about the data in JOSM, which includes a list of selected features, objects, how the selected objects are tagged, and then the different layers in view. The panels can be turned on and off in the Windows menu. The next slide. So now we can get to the fun stuff, which is mapping features. So you'll first need to download data from OSM, and there are several ways of doing this. You can click File, then Download from OSM, or click on the Download button. Once you've clicked on either of these, a window will open. Make sure you're under the Slippy Map tab, and use your mouse to pan and zoom to an area that you know well. Draw a box around that specific area you wish to edit, and then click Download at the bottom of the window. The data will then be downloaded from OSM, and you can start editing. Slide. So another easier way of doing this is simply by logging on to osm.org and search or zoom to the area you wish to edit, and then just copy the URL. Next slide. And then take that copied URL and paste it into JOSM using File, Open Location, or Control-L on your keyboard. If you're using Hot Tasking Manager, after selecting a task to map, you can select JOSM as your editor, and it will automatically open the data for your selected area. And it will highlight your square so you know not to go outside a certain area. Next slide. Once you have your data downloaded to JOSM, you can activate and deactivate the visibility of any layer, change the order of alignment, increase and decrease its transparency, merge a previously downloaded layer with a new one, or duplicate and delete layers.
Right, just before I get into this, I just saw there's a question there in the chat about the utils plugin too, and what does it do? I know I think it provides a number of different tools, one of which I believe includes the add nodes at intersections. So if you have roads that cross that don't have an intersection node there, it'll add those for you automatically by selecting the roads and then selecting the tool. Kate, are you aware of any other specific tools that come out of the Utils 2 plugin? I can't remember offhand. I'm not sure if the extrude tool comes out of there. I think that might be one of the stock ones that come out.
Those are the main ones I found. I think extrude might come from that, but I don't quote me on that. But the ones that you just listed are the main ones that I think most people use.
Cool. All right, thanks, Kate. And again, yeah, with other questions, please just throw them in the chat and we'll address them as we sort of switch up things here. All right, so one of the other most important things, of course, when you're setting up your workspace in JOSM is to use the right imagery. If you're using the tasking manager, you'll want to identify the imagery from that task if it identifies it. But adding imagery is pretty simple to do, as there's an imagery menu item at the very top. And sorry, video so you can see me. You can select a number of different imagery sources. You have Bing, you have 2 different Maxar, Esri. You can even add the existing OpenStreetMap layer as well if you wanted to. Now, once you add these items from the imagery, you'll notice them pop up on the right-hand side under the layers sort of information window. Okay, once you select it, it'll show up, and then each of them has a little sort of eyeball icon next to it. You can turn them on and off that way when you're working through it. And as well, oftentimes we will look at different imageries for a particular area. Now, one of the nice things with JOSM is that you can do a fair bit of adjustment with the imagery of your choice. So one of the helpful things is that once you've selected your imagery, you can click on the tool here in the bottom right and adjust the various sort of components or aspects of the imagery. You can adjust its transparency or opacity, right? If you want to make it more invisible or not, or transparent. But one of the ones people often use actually is the gamma. You can change the gamma, increase it or decrease it, which will affect sort of how some features can pop out on the image. So the image by default may not be as good as it could be, but by adjusting some of these tools you have, the sharpness, the colorfulness, the gamma, you can actually be able to discern features a little better sometimes. All right, so let's talk about editing. Like any vector editor, everything in JOSM, everything in OSM is broken down to the simplest forms of geometry, right? We're looking at points, lines, and then aerial representations or polygons. And these all represent sort of the real life features that we try to show on the map. We use the simple draw tool. We'll talk more about that in a second to identify those features. And one note I'll make here is that if you are downloading data from OSM to map in JOSM, or if you're using a tasking manager, as you see in the slide here, you'll see the area for editing will be sort of clear with the vector data, but outside of that area, you'll see this diagonal sort of hashing lines. And though that is the area that they're suggesting that you do not edit, because that is not within the scope of the area that you downloaded, okay? So in ID, you're used to having that sort of pink box to identify where your area is coming out of Tasking Manager. In JOSM, you have this sort of diagonally striped line to identify the area where you should and should not map. Basic operations when working with JOSM. One difference when you're navigating around the map is that you use the right mouse button to pan around the map or drag. So you can click and hold down the right mouse button, drag the map to where you want it to go, and release it. Okay, in ID, you're using the left mouse button to click and drag around, but in JOSM, use the right mouse button. The left mouse button you can use to actually select features and maybe move the nodes, and edit them and manipulate them. And then zoom in and zoom out, you can use the scroll wheel. You can also use the plus sign, the keys of plus and minus on your keyboard to actually zoom in and out as well. All right, some basic operations when it comes to using JOSM. There's sort of three main sort of editing tools or editing buttons you can use. Select is the one shortcut of S that is used to actually select features. Okay, when you mouse over the feature itself, it should highlight, and when you select it, it'll turn red. If you want to add data, you use the Add Data button. Unlike ID, where you have three different buttons you choose from for adding features, depending if you're adding a node, a line, or a polygon, or an area. With JOSM, you use just the one tool. And then there's also a delete tool if you choose to use that. So by clicking the delete button or the Control-Delete keyboard sequence, once you have that selected or enabled that tool, everything you touch, everything you click on will be deleted. Okay. Oftentimes, because deleting can be detrimental, I often just sort of select the feature using the select tool. I select it, then hit the delete key on my keyboard. But if you have a large number of things you wish to delete, then you can perhaps use the delete tool, change your cursor so that it becomes basically a delete tool, and everything you click will be deleted. So with this single tool, the single add data tool, we can add nodes and ways. So nodes are sort of the simplest form of geometry. It's just a point. And they're used to indicate anything that doesn't have much of a aerial dimension. So if you're looking, maybe you're identifying the location of public toilets, or the location of a public fountain, or fire hydrants, or traffic lights, something like this. You put the one node in place, and then you tag it appropriately. Ways are simply an ordered list of nodes, and between each node, there's a line segment. Okay, so if you're drawing a road, you simply do a number of those in sequence to trace the path of the road. If you want to close a way, that means the very last node you click will be on top of the first node you started with. So you're creating a polygon, an area. So for buildings, for lakes, for agricultural areas, things like this. Again, this is a series of nodes. Each node is connected to the next one by a line segment. So how to draw a node? The simplest form of geometry is to use the draw tool, right, to add data tool. And then you can simply double click and it will drop a node right where you place it, right where you click. And then you can go back to the select mode. Again, every button, every tool you have in JOSM will have a shortcut. And as you get used to these shortcuts, you'll be able to maneuver through these tools fairly well. But you can also use the escape key after you finish drawing something. You can use the escape key to get out of the drawing mode or the add nodes mode, and then features will remain. And we'll show some of that in the demo today. So one of the things I forgot to mention at the top is after we go through the slideshow, or I can't recall if I said this, we will actually have a demo of JOSM itself. And drawing a way is simply drawing a series of nodes in a sequence. So using the left mouse button, you start with one click. Then as you move your mouse to the side that follow the path of a river, of a road, of a building, then you will continually click successive buildings to trace that feature. When you are done tracing the shape of that feature via the road, you can simply double click to end it. You can press the S button to go back to selection mode. You can press the escape key. Like any kind of geospatial software, you use QGIS or ArcGIS or any other software, there are often many ways to do the same thing to get to the same result. Okay, if you're drawing a polygon or an area or a building, then you can start with your first node and then trace around this lake, for instance, and then you come all the way back to the first node, double click on that first node, and then that will close the loop, and then now you have a closed way or a polygon. When mapping roads, we always want to map the center line of the road as best we can. Again, this will be a linear feature. Of course, this will be a linear feature. So we're going to map a series of nodes that will be joined by line segments. You want to make sure you're zoomed in close enough so that you can identify the road and where the center is. You start with one node. So you go into you can click A to go to your add nodes tool, and then click the first node, click successive nodes. When you get to the end, you can double click or hit select button, what have you. The next thing you need to do is actually tag it. Because remember, all features need to be tagged in some manner in OSM. Otherwise, they're just sort of vector noise and vector data that is existing without a purpose. So in this case, it is a road. So all roads are a form of highway. So we know that all features in OSM have a tagging system of having a key and a value, a key being the overarching or the larger sort of classification of the feature, and then the value being a more specific feature, a more specific representation or description. So in this case, we're saying it's a highway and then what type of highway. So when we are working in JOSM, we can draw our feature. If you hit the Alt-A key, you'll get this pop-up window that you're seeing in this little GIF video here, and where you can actually add the tags themselves. The nice thing with JOSM here is that once you identify, like in this case, it's a highway, that's the key. For the value, it'll filter all the values. You can hit the drop down if you wish, but it'll actually filter based on the type of feature you're drawing and the key that you put in there, the key parameter that you put in. If you select a feature and you wish to edit that feature, edit the tags, you can click Alt-S, and that will bring up this, this tagging window again, where you can actually change the edits. Now, when I work in JOSM, as you'll see a little later, and I think a lot of people do, on the side window informational panel, there is one where you can have the tagging information. So you can pull up the pop-up window if you wish, or you can simply have the window to the side of your JOSM instance and do the changes there. Mapping land use, this is where we see an example of a closed way. So again, you're starting the same way, where you start with one node and then with a single click, and then you simply trace around the feature that you want to identify, and then end at the end where you started by double clicking, and that closes the loop. So you have a closed, topologically sound polygon. And again, you bring up the Alt-A pop-up window for tagging, putting information, put in the key. In this case, it's going to be land use. The value will be residential, and then you click OK, and then that feature is identified and appropriately tagged.
So tags are used to label the edits you've just made. They are attributes that give descriptions to basic elements such as nodes, ways, or closed areas. A tag is a key value pair, and when you select on an existing way or node, the tags are displayed in a panel called Tag/Memberships in the top right. Its tags will be displayed there in a table with keys on the left and values on the right. A key is a string describing the general classification of the features, like highway, for example. And then the value gives more specific information within the class key. For that same highway example, a specific value may be residential or unclassified. And then some tags are straightforward, while others may have more complicated meaning. And keys and generic values are lowercase and use underscore to replace space. To add a tag, you simply click Add under the Tag/Memberships box, and a small window will appear. You can select your key or value from the drop-down list, and this drop-down list contains all the values in the downloaded area and all the known tags or presets. If you made a mistake or need to change any existing tag, you can either double-click it or click the Edit button next to Add and make your change. Everything you draw in JOSM needs to be properly labeled by what they represent. Presets help with this labeling. After you draw a line, point, or shape, you can select a tag from the presets menu and it will automatically be applied to the object you just drew. To activate the buildings tool, you can either click mode at the top of the screen, then hit the draw buildings, or you can just use the keyboard shortcut by hitting the letter B. To create the building, left click on the corner of the building and keep holding it down. Move your pointer all along the side and release on the corner. Then just drag the line until it fits perfectly around the building that you're tracing. The buildings tool will automatically tag and square off your buildings. Make sure that you are lining up your squares with the building you are mapping. If you come across a building that isn't a basic square or rectangle, like an L, U, or T-shaped building, draw a rectangle along the longest edge of the building and then click X on your keyboard, which will activate the extrude mode, and then double click at the point where your building extends past the rectangle. You can then drag the edge until it fits the building shape perfectly, which you can see being done in the GIF. Next slide. To trace a circular building, stay in building mode, but hit Alt-Z, but on Macs it'll be Option-Z, and then trace the diameter of the circular building, and once you release it, it will snap into a perfect circle. Make sure to switch back to rectangle building mode by hitting Alt-R or Option-R for Macs. To map a building that has a courtyard in the center of it, draw one side with a rectangular building tool. Hit S on your keyboard to activate select mode, and then select the shape you traced and hit B again. Trace the remaining sides, and then after pressing the S key again, hold down Shift and select all the overlapping buildings. Once they have all been selected, you can hit Shift J to merge the buildings into one.
I just want to interject here that this tool is particularly helpful, not only for these sort of hollowed buildings, but if you have a number of buildings in a subdivision that are all lined up perfectly, you draw that first one, keep that first building selected, and every building you trace after that will be parallel to that building, to the initial building. Like you see here, they do the first one on the bottom right, leave it selected. All the ones they trace afterwards, you know, will be plumb to that first one. So it's really kind of a cool tool.
So if you see any buildings that have been traced but aren't squared off, you could select the building, then hit the letter Q on your keyboard, and this will square the building for you. You can rotate selected buildings by holding Shift Control, or resizing a building by holding Control Alt, which again on a Mac would be Control Option. To disconnect a building from other features, simply press the letter G with the building selected. You want to make sure you're frequently uploading your edits. To upload them, select the hard disk icon with an upwards arrow to display the upload pop-up. In the upload pop-up, you can add chain set comments using hashtags to let people know the edits you made, such as added buildings and roads. You will also put in what imagery you used to map. This way, others will know to use the same imagery to align with the edits that you have just made. Once you add this info, you are ready to upload by selecting Upload Changes or hitting Enter on your keyboard. If you are using JOSM to map a task, ensure that JOSM is open and running on your desktop, and find your project that you want to work on in Tasking Manager. And under the Editor pop-up menu, make sure that JOSM is selected. Once you hit Map a Task or Map Selected Task, the data will be loaded to JOSM. And to make JOSM your default editor from ID, go to the Settings menu found underneath your username, and then you can scroll down to Default Editor and select JOSM so that it's always the default. So as I mentioned on a previous slide, when you're uploading your work to OSM, you want to add a comment describing your work to let others know the changes you've made. And you want to try and be as specific as possible if you have local knowledge about a building or area. So you want to make sure to state your source, whether that's Bing, Maxar, or local knowledge. If it is your first upload, then JOSM will ask you to enter your OSM account details. If you want to see the changes you made, you can go to openstreetmap.org and move to the area that you edited. The changes you made should now appear on the map. Sometimes it could take a couple minutes for those changes to pop up. If you check back in a few minutes, they should all be there. And then here are just a bunch of shortcuts that are helpful and make mapping so much more efficient and less time consuming so you can do so much more. And helpful ones to keep in mind are the letter B for creating buildings, which you do need to have a plugin for, S for select mode, G to unglue ways, and Q to square up your buildings. There are plenty of more that are useful, so check them out when you get a chance. And they kind of become second nature when you start using them.
Absolutely, the shortcuts are really, really quite something. People that are super efficient at it, I've seen them with the right hand on the mouse and the left hand on the keyboard, and they're just like banging away like a well-oiled machine, switching
like
between tools. Yeah, you have muscle memory, and then you just go for it. So it's pretty cool when you see that.
And then, so thank you for listening to us talk about JOSM. We're gonna give a quick demo of everything we just talked about, but first, are there any questions anyone has? I just want to make sure there's anything in the chat.
Nothing in the chat right now. Yes, the K-pop invasion is closer than it appears, apparently. So hopefully we can keep them in Korea for now. while we go through the rest of this this demo. So as Kate mentioned, what we're going to do now is we talked, especially if you're new to JOSM, we just gave you a fire hose in the face of information. So we are going to demo some of the stuff we talked about here to get you guys sort of up and running with the software itself. If you have JOSM installed on your computer, by all means, bring it up. And if you'd like to follow along with Kate and myself as we do this, then you're welcome to do so. But as you know, this is being recorded. So if you want to come back and look at the sort of the tools that we used and talk about what we did, then by all means, you're welcome to do that later. And of course, answer questions or ask questions and let us know of any questions, any issues you have. All right, take it away, Kate.
Okay, so right now I've pulled open what everyone will see when they first log on to JOSM. I'm going to run through setting up and authorizing your account. You can remote control the plugins first. Mine's of course already set up, but so on my Mac, you go to JOSM then Preferences, but I think on most computers you'll go to File and then Preference. There's also a little shortcut right there that you can just click. First, to authorize the account. Again, mine's already authorized, but what you'll probably see on your screen is a little button that says click authorize now, and then you can enter all your username and password for OSM, click authorize now again, and then accept access token. And then you should see this same thing, hopefully, or a similar version to it. Next, we'll do set up remote control, which is this tab fourth from the bottom. All you have to do is click this, check, and then you're good to go. You can click OK, or you can start adding the plugins. So mine are all added, but I'm just going to go through each one. So the first one is Buildings Tools, which is this one right here. You would check it off and then search your next one. Utils Plugin 2, right there. Check that one off. And then the last one we'll go through is Mapathon, which is right there. So now I have all three checked. I'm going to click download list, which I've already done, so I won't do that now, but that's what you guys will do if you're downloading your plugins. Now that everything's all set up, I'm good to go and click OK. So now the next thing we'll do is start loading data to the map. There are 3 different ways that I'm going to show you. The first is going to be the way where you go to OSM, find your area, and then copy the link. I've already copied the link just to make it a little bit less confusing. And then you can go to File, Open Location, copy this link I have. Okay, and then simply paste it in, make sure this is selected, and then download URL. Wait for a few seconds for it to all download. And sometimes it's slow. And I've just selected a little area in New York City where the Met is, and it should pop up and look like this. So that's the first way of doing it. I'm going to delete this layer. The second way is to download from OSM. We're going to go to File, Download Data. Then you should be under the Slippy Map tab. And this is just an area I was recently mapping, but I'm just going to say, go here. Let's say I had local knowledge of the area and I want to map this specific section. So I would make my square of what I want and then just click download. And it'll pop up right there. So that's the second way. And then the final way would be to go to OSM or a Hot Tasking Manager. And this is just one of the projects we've been working on. Find a section you want to map. Make sure your editor is selected to JOSM, and then click Map Selected Task. And then it'll pop up. Right now it says could not load image, but once I add imagery, it'll all work and be clear. I've tested this already. Sometimes that could just happen from the internet connection or whatever. But yeah, so that's the last way. But now that we have our map set up, we're gonna just familiarize ourselves with what we're actually seeing on the screen. And first we'll start with the menu items, which is all up here. So first File, we were kind of just in that. We used Open Location. I was deleting the layers, download data, and edit. None of this, I haven't made any mistakes or did any mapping, so I can't undo or redo. If I wanted to copy and paste something, let's say there's a row that's exactly like this, I could copy and then paste. lot, but those are a few things you could do in the edit. Next is view. This is just zooming in, zooming out. I mean, for the most part, I just use my mouse or plus and minus, but this is just another way of getting to where what you want it to look like on your screen. Mode, you get select mode, draw, buildings, extrude. I never really go to mode because for the most part, I'm just using those shortcuts, which are very, very helpful, which they also put all those right along the side for how you can access those shortcuts. Next would be tools. None of these are highlighted because I'm not selected on a task or haven't made any edits, but once I did do that, I could use unglue ways if I made a mistake. If I was to just physically draw out a circle, but it wasn't a perfect circle, I could create circle. And again, all these are accessed through shortcuts on your keyboard as well. Some more tools. This is where I said some of the util plugins to tools are accessed. Add nodes at the intersection, add a source tag. And then next is data. I don't really use this ever, but these are here just if you guys ever need them. I'm sorry. The selection tool, select all, unselect all, and then you can get very specific with what exactly you want to select. Pull by accident. Presets. So this is where you can create your tags automatically and easily. If let's say I had a building I wanted to tag and I wasn't using the shortcut, I could go to man-made again, and then building. If I want to add a highway, streets, motorway, primary, secondary, whatever it is I need to add. And then under imagery, which we'll go into a little bit more later, this is where I can change what I'm looking at the screen and change the offset of it. And then windows, this changes all on the right side. So layers, if I want to get rid of that, get rid of it, but I can also add it right back. Mapathon, that was the other plugin tool I was talking about. And then this is a separate plugin I have, so you're probably not seeing scripting right there. And then help if you ever need it. Next thing I want to talk about is the toolbars. So up here, popping up, we have the presets. The download button, the upload button, which is currently grayed out because I don't have any edits made, so there's nothing to be uploaded. Again, this is quick access to preferences, the presets. On this side, use this draw node. Might be easier just to click A on your keyboard and go to mode. Validation tool, which you probably won't use unless you get into validation. This shows you a little mini map of where you're editing. Okay, and then last, the information panel. So this shows you the different layers you're working with. And then the tags membership, like I was saying before, it shows the key, which is the highway, and then the value, the more specific of what it is unclassified. And we can see in this section that this highway has 74 nodes. This is part of the validation I was talking about. It could be helpful, just correct some mistakes, like see warning, okay, crossing highways, I can go and look and see where the mistake is. But again, it's not necessarily something you might be using until you start validation. But now that we have like an idea of what we're looking at, we want to figure out how to use this. So we're going to use the right click to drag the screen around to get to wherever we want to look, and then left click to select an object, and zoom in and out, just use your wheel or the plus or minus buttons. Now let's add some imagery so we can actually see what we're mapping. So for this task, I know the instructions said to use Bing, but it hasn't been updated in a while. So trees have been cut down, buildings have been added, and it's looking more so like Maxar will be the better one. But I'll show you both just to see, because you want to check all your sources to make sure you're matching up with the best imagery you have. So in here we can see it's kind of a little bit off. Let's go to Maxar, which is way better. It's perfect for the most part. From what I can see, you can look in other areas too to make sure. But from what I can tell, it looks like the best one. Let's say that this was a better one, but it was just slightly off. You can also go to Imagery and then Imagery Offset, click Maxar, and then move your screen around so it fits perfectly. I don't need to do that, so I'm just going to click Cancel, but normally you click OK once you get it to be all lined up. So now we have our imagery all set up. I'll show you how to draw buildings, roads. So first, creating nodes. I'm going to select A just to access this draw feature, but you can go to mode and just select draw right there, or on the side too. But to start drawing, let's say there's a road right here that I needed to connect. I could click that and then just trace along. Obviously there's no road, but I could either double click here or elsewhere if that's where the road ended. And then you'd want to add your, let's say it was highway unclassified, minor recent tags, so I can use easy access, click OK. That's how you draw a road or a way. To draw a building, first I'll do it without the building shortcut. Let's take this building right here. You just want to line it up as best as you can. It's not going to be a perfect square, but afterwards, once I have it complete, I can just click Q and it squares it right up. And then make sure you add that building equals yes tool, unless you know what type of building it is from being local or something. Okay, let's delete this here. Now using the building tool, I'll just click V or go to mode and draw buildings and simply trace it out. And there we go. It's a little bit off, but it's already, the tags are added, it's squared off, and it's ready to go. So that's why it makes it a little bit easier than the other way. So if you have those L-shaped buildings like we were talking about, I'm going to show you two different ways you can create the buildings. The first one would just be create the long rectangle, pretend there's an L-shaped building there, and then create another one. Click your S key, hold down Shift, and select both buildings. Still holding down Shift, click Shift J, and then I'm going to square it off just to make sure. And there's your first L-shaped building. So the other slightly more easy way of doing this is to create that long rectangle again, and then clicking your X or going to extrude, and then double clicking and pulling that up, and there's your building. Okay, so that's my part of the demo. I'm gonna pass it on to Richard, but before I do, is there any questions? I don't know if you guys have been asking in the chat and have been answered, but yeah.
Some people have some trouble when they're going through the authorization process. Okay. That might be a version control issue, but also mention to them that if you try to upload information that you've traced in JOSM and you haven't set this up yet, it will automatically prompt you to log in with your OSM credentials so that it can verify that you're an OSM user, so it can sort of submit those things. Did you have any other information? Because a couple of people got an error when they tried to do what you were explaining in the demo there. Yeah.
I wish there's a way I can see their screen.
It can be a little difficult because we can't see exactly.
I know
what you're getting, but
where's the questions? Just like, do you see the authorized now button? Like, so they inputted all the information and it's just not working. Because sometimes I've had problems where maybe your JOSM isn't like totally up to date. Recently, I was having this issue and like it wasn't properly uploading, so I had to re-download and update it. I don't know if that's the issue.
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple different ways to sort of to get at that, but it's.
Maybe I want to look at this and make sure that you have the certain things checked off, like use the default, basic authentication. Maybe that could be helpful.
So if you're switching from use OAuth to use basic authentication, that could work. I think they were using the use OAuth option and they were getting an error. So if you change to use basic authentication, then use your OSM credentials and you should be okay. But like I said, if you're not logged in with your OSM credentials, and if you try to upload any data that you've created, any edits you've made, it will kick back and say, hey, we need your credentials to make sure you can actually you are an OSM contributor and that you are legit. So it'll do that. There's another, sorry, go ahead.
I just got a private message asking if I could do the L-shaped building once again. So I'm just going to do that quickly. I'll do both methods. So the first one, have your, so just draw your building in building mode. Let's say this was the way the building was shaped. And then you draw your second one. And then you go to select mode, which is this one. And then hold down shift and select both buildings just by clicking on them. Still holding down shift, click J, and then you'll have your building. It might not be squared off perfectly, so you want to use your Q to square it off. And then the second method, go back into building mode, draw your long rectangle, and then click X, and this will get you to extrude mode. Double click wherever the building would go up, and then drag until your building's perfectly aligned. Hope that helped answer your question. And then you said there was one more question?
Someone mentioned, do you recommend Maxor versus Bing Imagery? It really depends on the area. It really depends on the area and the currency of the data. And when you're working through Tasking Manager, of course, we always want to identify what imagery is noted in the project instructions and try to honor that as best we can. But as sometimes that is impossible, especially if the project is older, or perhaps part of the imagery that is noted maybe has a bunch of clouds in it, so you can't use it. So you have to use an alternate imagery. The important thing is to make sure the features that exist in OSM align with the imagery before you start tracing. And when you make your commit messages, when you upload, make sure you identify the imagery that you're using and that you use to trace those features, so they can be sort of directly connected.
And then there's another question about how to prevent buildings from snapping together. You can click Control on that while you're hold it down, and that'll prevent them from snapping together.
Yes, that's an important one too. When you have a very congested area, that you can make sure you zoom in, you hold down Control, and that will prevent the nodes from snapping together.
I'll stop sharing now.
All right, now let me see. Let me turn my screen on so you can see my hairy face. There's my JOSM here. All right. So, and I need to share my screen, don't I? Let me do this. Oops. And JOSM. Okay, so you should see my instance of JOSM. I have it just rolled up here right now. For me, I'm just going to go to File, New Layer. So if you're following along with Kate, then that's fine. I'm just going to sort of draw in a blank space, at least to start. And to get things going, I'm actually going to scroll in or zoom in. You'll see it right now in the scale bar up here. I'm at 0 to 1,640 feet approximately. So I'm going to zoom in to something a little more realistic where I can draw buildings and roads and different things like this. I'm going to sort of just draw some fictitious information around here and to sort of get things going. So the first thing I want to talk about is tagging. So as you see, I'm just drawing a linear feature here. I started with one click, and then I'm going to end with a double click. And I'm going to hit the S button, or I can go back here to the select tool, and it exists here. It doesn't have a tag. Okay, so I can hit the Alt A button, but as you see here on my right-hand side, I have this tags memberships window. And this right panel can get as congested or as uncongested as you want, because you can close these and open them back up as you see fit. Okay, so I have the tags and memberships here. If I want to click add a tag, it shows up this pop-up. Can you guys see the pop-up okay? Is that coming up? Okay, can you see it?
Yeah, sorry.
Okay.
Yes, we can see.
All right, great. Just sometimes pop-ups don't show up when you're sharing a particular application. All right, so the last thing I did, I guess, was highway residential. I'm going to say okay for that. And then, of course, once you unselected it, so it will render it with the appropriate tagging. So I'll make another one. And it goes down this way. And again, if I go Alt A this time, so I just hit the hotkeys on my keyboard, Alt A, and I'm going to make this one highway secondary. As you saw Kate did, you always have a list of features here. And again, if you wanted to, if you weren't sure what it should be called and what the options are. So for highway, these are all the options that you have. You have the drop down here to actually select the appropriate drop downs. Okay, so I'm going to say secondary, hit OK, and then whoops, get rid of that. And then if I go back using the shortcut S, I go back to an arrow. And you'll see this is rendered properly. One of the other things you may have noticed is that when you choose a tool, a different tool, the cursor will actually change. So right now I'm in select mode. If I hit B for building, you'll see that it changes to a crosshair, and you see like a little sort of boxy building looking thing next to the cursor. If I go to extrude, then it changes to a right triangle, right? An arrow, and it goes to a right triangle. If I go back to select mode, it changes to it keeps with the arrow and then has that little sort of dotted box next to it. So you'll see that changing, and that will give you a good clue of what mode you're in when you're actually tracing features. Now, one of the other things you can do is, if I draw another tool here, or draw another line here, I'm going to click A for the shortcut for adding nodes, and I'm going to draw another line up through here. And say this is a road, I'm going back to my selection tool. I'm going to use one of the presets that we see up here. I'm going to move slightly. All right, so we have presets, highways, it's a street, and then now I'm going to select, maybe this one is a primary road. Okay, now when you use the presets menu, you'll actually get a much larger series of options to fill in right away, okay, if you wish to do so. So a lot of streets have names, they have a number of lanes, they have construction materials, they have a number of different variables that you can add in here if you know them, okay? When we are tracing from satellite imagery or we're tracing remotely, we don't always know that information, especially things like speed limits or their names, unless we have personal knowledge. But there is a way where you can have basically a single form where you can fill in as much information as you can. If I know this particular road has 2 lanes, right? And it has 1 lane in each direction, okay? And it has a max speed of, say, 50 kilometers per hour, okay? So you can fill in all of these things, all right? If it has an incline, or I guess it would be a banking angle. It has, if you know the width, if you know the smoothness, if you know the surface, maybe it is asphalt, maybe it's paved, maybe it's gravel. So all these various attributes you can add right in through this presets window if you want. And I can say apply preset. And then now you'll see this road is still selected. Here where it shows the tags and membership window here, it has all this information. Whereas before, like this very first one I did, all right, I just drew this line, then I just said added value and highway equals residential. That's perfectly fine. That's what we mostly do. But if you use the presets, if you have that extra information, you actually have a form that you can fill out. Now, I could still do the same thing with this guy. I can simply say add, and then I think it was like lanes, and then you can identify how many lanes it has. Okay, and then because how many lanes, identified as 2, right? So you can build this whole set one by one if you wish, but by using the presets, you can actually sort of throw a bunch of stuff in there all at once if you know it, okay? So there's different ways you can add it. As well, if something was wrong with this and someone says, no, it doesn't have 2 lanes, it only has 1 lane, you can go back in here by selecting the feature, right? You can go back into this window over here, select the tag you wish to edit. If I say edit, then now I can go back in and say, no, this is actually 1 lane, and it's been updated now to just having 1 lane, all right? And this one has 2 lanes. And it's the one we don't know how many lanes it has, but it's a secondary road, all right? So there's lots of, you can get into the very nuanced features of each feature, various sort of aspects of each feature as you wish. Sometimes you come across features that are round, and there's two tools that will sort of make round features. And if I was just to draw around a silo or a circular building of some sort, I could simply sort of draw that, and it doesn't look very round. But if I go to align circles in a node, align nodes in a circle, it will simply take the nodes I've created and evenly space them so that they sort of make as good a circle as possible. So if I did a simple square, or I did 4 sides, and I said align nodes in circle, it'll simply make them even and basically square them for you, okay? But if you want something that articulates the actual circle a little better, you can use the, where did I go? Create circle, right? Or shift O. Shift O, you'll see that, of course, with all these drop downs, you'll see the shortcuts listed here, right? So if I just click here and click here, and I can go up, say create circle, and then what I did was I drew the radius, all right? If I have that selected, I can simply say create circle, and it will put the appropriate amount of nodes. If I make a bigger one, it'll just add more nodes to create a bigger circle, okay? Now, with these tools, of course, I'm going to press S to go back to my selection tool. You'll see that each of these is gray, and if you notice over here in the tags and memberships, none of them have any tags. So these tools don't add any tags whatsoever, okay? So once you add these features, you get in the right shape. You still have to either Alt-A to bring up that context menu, or go to, if you have the tags and membership information panel here open, then you can use it there. One of the other nice things that JOSM has, which really helps you edit things, especially when you get the validation, or if you're working in an area, and you're adding new data and you see a number of mistakes, you can fix those, and you can fix them pretty quickly. So I'm going to click B here just to have a couple of buildings here, and then what you can do is things aren't quite aligned properly. Select them. And again, I was in the building tool and I clicked S to get back to the selection tool. If you hold down the Control key and the Alt key together, you'll see again, my cursor has changed. And now I can make it larger or smaller, right? It proportionally makes each of the things larger or smaller. Okay. If I hold down Shift and Control key, you'll see my cursor changes again, and now I can rotate it. So things aren't quite sized properly, or things aren't quite oriented properly, you can very quickly, using these tools, make those adjustments to make sure it actually represents what's on the satellite imagery as best we can. Okay. Now sometimes we have I'll draw another building here. Another one. Let me see. I'll do another one here and here. And let me just do this guy. I've got. All right. So this guy. Oops. All right. Leave him. All right. So as I use the building tool, of course, the corners are perfectly plumb, they're perfectly square. And the tag is building equals yes. So we have all the basic information we need for a particular building. So, but the problem is, this happens a fair bit. You'll see this sort of node on top of node here. Let me zoom in a little bit here. If I was to move this building, I'm taking the road with me. Okay. Same thing with this guy here. All right. Or if I try to move the node, then I'm moving the road, but I'm altering the shape of the building. Neither of those is a good option, okay? To unglue these things, you simply need to select the feature, hit G, and then they become unglued, Okay, and then you can sort of make that modification. Now I just did, let me Control Z that, let me go back one. So these are both still connected. If you have a situation like this, where you have multiple buildings attached to the same road, you can select them individually, hit G for the shortcut, or go into Tools and Unglue Ways. Okay, it'll do this one. However, if I select this road, okay, and I select G or Unglue Ways, it will unglue every building or every other feature that is glued to it. So if I hit G on this now, you'll see the red node shows up here and a red node shows up here. Okay, so now I can easily adjust these guys, and maybe this road actually goes in this way a little bit, and that one goes up that way a little bit. So you can adjust them, okay, pretty easily. If you have, let me draw another building here, or draw another line here. Maybe you have another sort of short road coming down here. I'm going to lane. All right, I want to join these nodes together. Okay, you can actually merge nodes together, and it will actually move the geometry. That's the thing, though. Okay, so the shortcut is M. You can actually move the geometry. So if I zoom in here, let me undo that. So I'm zoomed in very close right now. But when I select these guys, again, I'm just clicking and dragging to select them both, or you can shift select. If you're using the merge nodes, M is a shortcut, it'll actually move the geometry of one of those nodes to the other one. But now they're joined. Okay, so those are things you need to sort of be aware of. So let me make another line here. Say I have another road comes up this way and stops there. Okay, so I have this guy, and I'm going to say highway, streets, residential. All right, so I got this residential road connecting to this secondary road. It can happen, right? So there are two different ways, but actually maybe some development went on, or maybe the person that drew this road here didn't tag it correctly. It's not secondary, but residential. Okay, you can combine these together. You can tag these. You can change this tag, right, to residential. Easy enough. You can go edit and residential, and then now it's the same, but these are still separated. If you make them one road, you can simply combine them using C, shortcut for C. And then now this is one road. Okay, let me just undo that. Now we can also combine them with two different types. All right, so now you see this is a residential road, right? You see they're rendered differently, and you see the tag is different. And then we have this one, which is a secondary. If I shift select both of these, and I again go combine or C, it's going to say, hold up a second. I have two objects, but they're not the same. All right, do I want to continue? Because it needs to make them both the same for them to actually be combined. All right, so they need to have the same tags. I'm going to say yes, and you can also say, do you want to continue? Yes. You can also tell it, don't show me this again, only for this session, or keep showing me this reminder to let me know that things are joining that are not tagged the same. All right, so it's two objects, but the following tags are used conflictingly: highway, secondary, residential. So if I just say yes, oops, this comes up here. Can you see this conflict window come up? Yes, okay. So the key is highway, that's very good. But the value is secondary and residential. Do you want to use one of them, all of them, none of them? what do you want to use? I'm going to say residential, hit apply, and then now it's all residential. Okay, so we'll warn you when these kind of things happen. To split away, maybe this road needs to be split here because maybe it changes names or something. You can always split a road as well, or split away, and simply using the shortcut P. The node that you select for the split function that'll be the dividing point, right? So I selected this node in here, and I simply said split way, and then it split this what was one road into multiple roads. One of the other tools you mentioned earlier about adding nodes at intersections. You'll see here I have two roads. I have a primary road and a residential road, and they're crossing each other. Well, there's no bridge, overpass, or anything like this indicated here. So to be topologically correct, there needs to be a node there. Now, this may happen in a number of places if you have a large road network. So to fix that, you can simply just select each of these lines that cross. Okay, and then under more tools, you'll see add nodes at intersection. Shift I is the shortcut, and it will add a node at the intersection. It won't change the geometry, like the position of the geometry. The lines will stay at the exact same position. So I click on that, and then now you'll see the node is now there, right? And they're joined. Now, if I undid that, another way to do it, of course, would be to simply add a node, put them on top of each other, and then using the M key for shortcut, I can merge them together. Right? Now they're merged together. So there's multiple ways to do it, but I think just selecting the lines, clicking add nodes at intersection is a fast way to do it. What else do I want to do here? Let's see. The Mapathon plugin that Kate mentioned earlier. You'll see when you add the plugin, it actually adds a menu item up here. It has a number of good tools here. One of which I'll show you here now is the batch circle building. They also have batch orthogonal building and batch L-shaped building. So if you're in an area that has a large number of circular buildings or circular objects, then you can trace a bunch of them very, very quickly. Same thing if you have a bunch of buildings that are square or rectangular in shape, you can do it sort of very, very quickly. It also has tools, which gets more into validation about selecting duplicate buildings and non-orthogonal buildings, but we won't get into that today. But for batch circle building, I can show you how that sort of works out pretty well. Let me see. Let me add some imagery. Where am I located? All right. So there's some, here we go. So there's some oil tanks here, okay? Say I want to draw them all together. I can use the draw circle tool. Whoops. I use the, I can maybe draw that, draw the radius, go to tools, create circle. Okay, great. But if I want to do a bunch of these together, I can use the Mapathon tool, right? Because we have a batch circle building. So how this works is that you draw the reference to the buildings first, then you click that tool. Let me show you what I mean. So I'm going to draw the radius for each of these buildings as one continuous feature. Then I click on that building, I click on that tool. So if I start with this guy, click here and here. So I'm just drawing the radius, the diameter, apologies. I do know basic math. The diameter of these guys. Then I go to Mapathon, batch circle building. And now you can see they're all drawn as buildings. Now, in this particular case, these are actually storage tanks, so they're not buildings. But it does allow you to draw them all quickly. Now, it does automatically, if I was to select one here, automatically tag it as a building that you see over here in the right-hand panel. Okay. This one, on the other hand, does not have a tag at all. All right, so we did want to tag it. We could go to the presets and go to man-made, and go down to storage tank. right? We don't have a name for it, but I can apply a preset and now it's colored. Okay. One mistake I see some people make is that they will say they want to change the tags for all of these guys here. All right, so I'll select them all. I can simply draw a selection like this to change the edits. Sorry, to change the tags. If I try to use a preset at this time, okay, and like I did last time, there's going to be an issue. So if I just go to presets, go to man-made, oops, go to man-made, and I go to my storage tank, the issue, so I zoom in here, is that not only is the tank or the way, which is this red line, tagged as a storage tank, but every single node is tagged as a tank, which it's not. This makes the tank, the nodes just comprise the shape of it. So when I hit Control-Z, get out of that. Okay, so just be careful.
Interrupt for 1 second. We just had one question that said, how about objects which are not circle, like spherical shape objects?
Things that aren't circles but are spherical.
Yeah.
So you might have you might have something that's oblong, or maybe it's sort of has 3 or 4 of the corners are rectangular, but then it has another part that like curves out and semicircular. In a situation like that, if one is semicircular and then one sort of part rectangular, I would draw a circle, draw a rectangle, and then join them together. Or you may have to, because you do want any corners that are plumb, any corners that are 90 degrees, you want them to be 90 degrees, do a building sort of tool for that one, and then either freehand or use a circular tool for that, merge them together, and then you can go for it that way. So sometimes you have to piece together different shapes to make the actual shape to represent what's on the ground. So yeah, so that's when you're tagging, make sure you're not grabbing the nodes because those will get tagged individually as well. Right, so in this case, one way to do it is to actually use a search function, okay? Because you can zoom in and say, click that one, shift, click this one, shift, click that one. But one way to do that a little more quickly is using the search function. And if I hit Control F, or you can use the magnifying glass up here, you'll get the search window pop up. So in here, we can search for features that are on our in our data layer, and we can search for them by various means. One of which is using the key value pairing. So if I say building equals yes, it's going to select everything that's in my workplace here. So this is the stuff I did earlier over here. Right, anything that's listed as a building is being selected. Okay, so let me back up over here. Say if I want to change these guys to tanks, well, I don't want the buildings. Well, these are buildings, but I don't want those other ones to be listed as tanks. But I notice these have a lot of nodes. Okay, so you can further refine it in different ways. You can say buildings in view, and then at which point it's only going to select whatever's in your current view. So right now, you can see that over here on the left-hand side of for my tags, I have 11 objects have been selected. Okay, and they all have the one tag. If I say building equals yes in view, and hit search, this now drops down to 5. You see it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now I only have these 5 that are selected. Another way to do it, I go hit Control F to get to my search window open again, or I can click the magnifying glass here. Instead of that, I can specify the number of nodes I'm looking for. I can say nodes, colon, then I know the other buildings all have 4 nodes, and only 4 nodes. These circles, of course, have many more. I can say nodes, and I can say 5 dash. Dash meaning to anything, because you can actually put a limit on the number of nodes. So if I wanted only features that were tagged as building equals yes, and have 5 to 8 nodes, oops, 5 to 8 nodes. So, whoops, nodes, colon 5 to 8, I hit search. It's not going to select anything because these all have more than 8 nodes. All right. But if I just say 5 or more, basically 5 dash, leave it open-ended. Now these guys get selected because they have more nodes. Okay, so now with these features selected, I can go to my presets and notice the nodes are not selected, just the way itself. I'm going to go to man-made and I'm going to go to storage tank. I'm going to hit add preset. And then now if you were to select it, you see that it shows up here. But also notice, it also is still keeping the building equals yes value. It's not overriding it, it's appending it. All right, so that's something we need to address as well. So if I do the same selection, the building equals yes, 5 or more nodes, it's going to select these guys. Now with building equals yes in the object membership window here, show all the tags, I can select this one tag and simply click delete. Now it has, instead of 2 tags, building equals yes, man-made equals storage tank, it only has man-made equals storage tank. All right, I've gotten rid of the building tags. So if I do my selection one more time, building equals yes, no, it's a 5. It should not select anything because these tanks are not tagged as buildings anymore. And there we go, they're not selected. The last thing I wanted to show you, let me go to a little neighborhood here. With the Mapathon tool again, if you wanted to do batch orthogonal building, I'm going to pretend these guys are all square. Sometimes I get this messed up. I think you need to have, I think it's 3 corners on each one. If I go Mapathon orthogonal building, then it creates 3 orthogonal buildings. Okay. If you want to do the L-shaped building, you need to go on the sort of the outside corners of the building. You just have to be careful with that tool because if you sort of create things and then if you back over yourself while you're drawing the next tool, drawing the next building and stuff, it can get confused. You just have to do them in sequence and not let your line that you're tracing overlap. And let me see, we got our road down here. Let me take this guy and have him do this. And this guy, have him do this. All right, I'm going to look at this stuff. I'm going to turn off the imagery for a second so we just see what I have here. So I have some roads, I have some buildings. The last thing I want to mention is the validation tool. When you upload your data to, we're over time, and I apologize, I'm going to make this really quick. When you upload your data from JOSM to OSM, it'll automatically do some validation checks for you. These are all topological by and large with some tagging. So if it thinks a tag is wrong, it'll identify it. It'll flag it for you. Or if it's missing tags, it'll identify it. But it also will also identify topological issues. Like right now, I have 2 buildings which are sitting on top of roads. Okay. So this validation results tool here, I'm going to run that. It's going to go through all of the features that are in my data layer and identify anything that looks missing or that is wrong. So you can expand this and it'll tell me I have 6 warnings. I have 2 crossing building highway issues. This one here, and this one here. You also see all the issues have been highlighted in yellow. All right, missing tag. If I want, I can right click on this and zoom to the issue, right, in untagged ways. All right, so this is untagged, this is untagged, this is untagged, right? Here's the issue here. I can simply move this guy off the road. All right, if I run this validation tool again, you'll see that those issues have now gone away. All right, but if I check this, I hold down shift, and I simply add this as a building equals yes, and I run the validation tool again. Now it's gone away. And this one is a cycleway without highway. I'm not sure why a cycleway. Oh, the cycleway is supposed to be located around a highway, which said it was a I'll just say, oh, that's wrong. I'm going to edit that. That should be highway equals residential. So it recognizes when there are pairings or mismatching of the tags and the topology as well. Okay, are there any questions at this time? That's sort of the main tools that we sort of wanted to talk about. The more you do with this, obviously, the more comfortable you become. And I do encourage you to go through, like go to JOSM and just start clicking around things and trying the tools, practicing with it to get familiar with them. Just remember, like all this data that I created is complete garbage. So I'm not going to hit the upload button. I'm going to delete it before I leave because I don't want this going to the OSM server, obviously, because it is complete garbage. Are there any questions? I know we ran late and I apologize. I apologize for that.
There is one. Is there a way to export the data to ArcGIS or any other software?
You can export it. JOSM, I believe, will export it as a .osm file. I think you can simply do a save as. Let's see here. Yeah, we'll save it as a .osm file. Oh, it's GeoJSON as well. So yeah, so once you get it as an OSM file, GeoJSON or GPX files, then your GIS should be able to import it without issue.
And then Dara just said to close the breakout room for final words and thoughts, unless someone else has any questions.
Yep, I'm gonna do that right now. All right, closing that breakout room. They'll be coming back within the next 60 seconds. Again, apologies, folks, for keeping you later than intended. But I hope that you found this useful. I'll wait for everybody else to come back, which they'll be doing very shortly. They'll be coming back into the main room nowish. And again, this will be available. This recording will be available online, be available to you hopefully later this week. Today is what, Wednesday? So later this week, once it's been saved, and you guys will be able to sort of look over this and look at the materials as well. And again, I encourage you to look over the various materials that are online when it comes to JOSM. I mentioned earlier, learnosm.org. That's a great resource for JOSM. In fact, they have a whole training set of modules in there. One of the modules has you actually download a sample.osm file that you can bring into JOSM, and you can play with and manipulate, and you can do all the fun things you want to it and not harm anything. But we made it. We ran a little long. Thank you very much for everybody. How was the Mapathon, Dara?
It was great. We actually got into some JOSM tips and tricks, but we gave some basic information of going to the YouthMappers resource library to find resources to build your skills. And then we also listened to some traditional Sierra Leone music. And yeah, I'll check the stats and see how much we contributed to the project. I do have some. Go ahead, Richard. Sorry.
No, I was just going to say I just seen recognizing some names here from YouthMappers, and like Jonathan from our school within Arin. I recognize your name, and Chamba, I saw you come in there as well. So it's good to see some YouthMappers that I've had the pleasure of meeting before to joining us today.